Okay. I will record it. The nice thing about recording it is that if there's something that somebody says that is not something I want public, I can always edit that part out. At least I.
Just as a note, as soon as you hit record, there was a window that came up that gave me the option to say okay or leave the meeting.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
We all got that. And as a matter of fact, up in the top left corner, there's a little flashing red light says record on it, as so that you know it's being recorded.
Okay, just people should remind me anyway, so that I make that announcement at 7 o'clock. Also, you do have my notes. That's true. Kathleen reminded me that she also takes copious notes of the meeting. The trouble is I'm way behind in transcribing those notes for the web, but details. Someday I'll get around to that. Yes.
Where will the recording reside? Is that on your computer, or?
It'll reside on my computer until I turn it into something that I upload to QuickTime, and then I'll link to it from the
website,
Strait Mac site. And the reason why I do it that way is, well, as an example, I record my church's sermons on Sunday, and 1 hour is about 5 gigabytes. And on the Strait Mac site, that would give me 3 recordings before, or 2 recordings or so, before I'd run out of space. So if I put it up on YouTube, it doesn't count against our storage on the site, because it's not really on the site, it's really on YouTube. So I will do that. Yes.
If somebody doesn't want to be recorded, couldn't they just post it over their camera on the screen? I mean, you know, if they don't want to be seen.
You can know if it's so much. You can hit no video.
That's if they don't want to be recorded in person, but if they don't want the session to be recorded for any way, the way the law is written, it's you have to get the consent of those in the meeting. And if somebody doesn't want to be recorded, then they have the choice of not being part of the meeting. It's not covering up their image isn't really the issue. It's
seen. I thought maybe they just didn't want to be seen.
The way the law isn't written that way. The law has to do, it goes back to 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, when they were recording things with audio. It hasn't really been updated to the internet age. Washington State, I don't know if this is still true, but at one point, the Washington State Constitution was like 180 pages. The US Constitution is like 26 pages. And of the Washington State Constitution, about a third of it dealt with railroads, because at the time that Washington State became a state, the railroads were run by a bunch of plutocrats that were basically taking all the profits from the farmers and the miners and everybody else. And so the Washington State Constitution had all kinds of protections to protect the people against railroads. Well, today that's kind of irrelevant, because the regulation of railroads is done by the federal government. But that doesn't mean that the state constitution has been updated or state laws have been updated. And there are conflicting things. If you remember, during the Clinton years, a aide recorded Monica Lewinsky without her permission, and she made that public. She was prosecuted under Maryland law, which made it illegal to record someone without their consent. But in Virginia, where the woman lived, it was okay. So she was trying to say that she should not be convicted because it was legal in Virginia, even though she recorded her in Maryland. Anyway, she ended up with about $500,000 worth of legal bills, but she didn't go to jail. And I don't really want to have to deal with $500,000 worth of legal bills. Plus, I'm not going to be recording any White House interns, but I still want to make sure that we're following the rules here. I don't think about the only thing I could possibly be found guilty of is maybe slandering various computer vendors because I do have opinions. Any
So
other
you're not
questions?
willing to take one for the team that way then, huh?
No, not really. I'm still involved in a legal case back in DC because I caught someone who was breaking into a government computer. And even though I did that when I was a government employee, and I haven't been a government employee for over 4 years, the case is still dragging along because this guy doesn't want to go to prison forever. Oh, well. Some people are just so picky about things like that.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have another one. Can I go to the cloud and edit my my people, my contacts? Because I have some on there that are so many years old, but to go through my contact one by one, and you have to then delete it, go to it and delete it. I just wondered if I can update my contacts in a faster way rather than each.
The answer is not really. If you did it through the cloud, it's actually slower than to do it on your computer. The fastest way is on your computer, because on the cloud, one of the things that people don't understand about the cloud, like right now, this seems like we're having this continuous discussion and with continuous video. It doesn't really work that way. The computer sends information and then it drops the connection. Then it sends information and drops the connection. It does it so fast that it doesn't seem like it's dropping the connection, but it's constantly dropping the connection. And video works the same way. When you take video with your computer, you're just taking with your iPhone, you're really just taking a whole bunch of still pictures really quick. And on your computer, you really do have your contacts open and you can edit it. And when you press enter, it saves it. But on the cloud, you have to select something, then you edit something, then you save something, then you select something different. And each time it has to stop doing that on your machine, talk to this computer thousands of miles away, get a response back before you can go on to the next thing. On your computer, that happens really, really, really fast. Hundreds of thousands of times a second in terms of how often it scans your keyboard and your mouse. And when it's going out over the internet, it's much, much slower, because if you live on the peninsula, everything is much, much slower, except for Office Depot, which is going out of business very quickly. But so it's much faster to do it in person than it is to do it on your computer than it is through the cloud. And it's much faster to do it on your computer than it is on your iPhone. If you really want to go crazy fast, try and edit a bunch of contacts on your phone. You can get really angry very quickly because again, you only have one finger to work with rather than 10. And you don't have a mouse. So it's the fastest way to do it is on your computer. You can export a whole bunch of contacts at once and then edit them and then bring them back as a batch, but only if you know how databases work, because what you're dealing with at that point is raw XML file. And XML is a file format used by databases. And if you look at XML on a text screen, it just looks like mysterious stuff. There are a whole bunch of fields, for example, in contacts that you don't see. So if you don't create a home address and a work address, the work address isn't going to show up. But when you export all that, all these empty fields show up, and it's very confusing to figure out what's real and what's Memorex. So unless you're a database programmer, don't even think about doing that as a batch. You want to do it one at a time, and you want to do it on your computer. And then I'm sorry, that's the way it is. I will tell you though that you can make things a little bit easier for yourself if you bring up contacts and you tell it to look for duplicates. And then if it finds a bunch of duplicates, it's real easy to tell it to merge the duplicates, which could get rid of a lot of spurious things. At one point, I had something like 7 duplicates of my own contact for a variety of reasons. And it confused both the computer and me. So if you get rid of the duplicates, and if you type in like your last name, and then you get all your relatives listed, and you can do them as a batch, that makes it a little bit easier. But you really basically have to do it one at a time. Another thing that I did after I retired, I typed in the name of my government agency. I worked for NOAA, NOAA.gov, typed in NOAA.gov, and lots and lots and lots of addresses came up, and I just deleted people that, I wasn't going to be talking to them on a daily basis anymore, and I didn't need them. So there are some tricks, but it's basically one at a time.
So on this last update, I have a Max 10, and I use the little button that, to app switch and clear out my apps and stuff like that. Are you aware of what I'm talking about?
Are you talking about the app library?
No, it's it's how I it's like, I guess, a shortcut to like my control center device, notification center, or I can use it to go to device and then app switcher and close my apps and stuff.
Okay.
It's because I don't have the little button on my phone. I don't know how to explain it. I can show it to you maybe.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what it is you're talking about.
Okay, so this little button right here.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so prior to the update, I was able to move it all around the screen, and now it's stuck in my lower left. Is there a specific update that I need to do, or is it just a glitch?
Are you using the new iOS 16?
I am.
I to be honest, I've never used that. It's called a soft button because it's not
Soft button.
it's not embedded in the computer. It's a soft button, and I've never used it. But it's part of the accessibility controls. So what I would do is I'd look under the control panel for the preferences for accessibility, because that's probably, if there's any control at all for it, that's where it would be. But I don't use it. It's used. I just don't use it. I was very glad to have the button go away, so I don't use it. The most of the people that I know who use it are like, I have a friend who has MS, and she uses it because she finds it easier to do certain things with the button. But I don't.
I'm in accessibility, and I don't see where it says soft.
It may not say,
maybe touch, or
it may not be. It's a soft button is the software term. Buttons that are not mechanical are called soft buttons. But what it's called in accessibility, let me take a look, see if it's mentioned.
Have you gotten your new phone yet?
Kathleen has her new phone, and she's quite happy with it. The one thing that she hasn't done is take a picture. And the reason why she got it was that she wanted it for the new camera, and she hasn't taken a picture yet. I don't see anything there off the top of my head, but it might be buried in something. I don't know, but I don't use the soft button, so I don't know. The way mine's set up, I use that menu across the bottom, so I don't pay attention to the soft button.
The menu across what bottom?
The bottom of the phone.
So you're talking about this portion?
Yes.
So when you've opened up an app, how do you close it?
I just flip it upward. There's like, for example, I'll show you. This is Google Maps. Maps, and at the bottom there's a dark bar, and if you flip it up, it closes it. So you just swipe from the bottom upward.
I like it because it's a real nice shortcut to a lot of stuff in settings.
If
I just,
you flip up like that, but don't raise your finger, just go up a ways and stop, then it brings all your apps up and you can close them individually like you used to.
Yeah, I can do that. The button, the soft button is just a real nice shortcut for all sorts of accessibility issues and notification center and everything like that. So I will work on that.
yeah, I'm sorry,
No worries.
it's not something I use, so it's not something I noticed.
Hey, Lawrence, since
Yes.
kind of talking about contacts, I've got an annoying one that I'm sure is just a setting on my Mac, my MacBook Pro. When I open my contacts, everything is duplicated, and everything's duplicated. When I go over to the window and I look at the lists of how the contacts are sorted, the groups, I've got a group that says iCloud, and I got a group that says all my Mac. So I'm getting a duplication because there's two sets there. Is there a setting where I can turn off like the iCloud set? Because it's also populating all our calendars that we share with two sets of birth dates and two sets of holidays and everything else. And I'm just wondering if there's just a click that I can turn something off.
If you bring up the, now this is on your MacBook?
This is actually on my MacBook.
Yeah,
And
if you-
go ahead.
If you bring up the setting, the preferences for contacts, you'll see that under the general setting, it says down at the very bottom, it says default account, and it'll say iCloud or on my Mac. And what had happened is that at some point it decided to show you both at once, but you pick only one or the other. What I would do is I probably just go from iCloud to your Mac or whatever the opposite is, and then reboot the machine, see if that refreshes it. The reason why it's done that way is that depending upon how you've set up your Mac in terms of how you use iCloud, you should always have your contacts synced to the cloud. But a lot of people, because they have slow connections or they use a MacBook and they're not at home all the time, they will have their default be on their Mac so that they have their contacts available no matter where they were. Whereas if you're at a home and your computer's turned on all the time, you probably have it set to the cloud. And sometimes if they get slightly out of sync, it will result in that duplication. I don't really know why it does that. I just know that yes, I have seen that, and I have seen people have that as an issue. But if your contacts are synced to the cloud, the ones on your Mac and the ones in the cloud should be identical. They're not really duplicates. It's just showing them twice. And exactly why I don't know.
Yeah, and you're right. They are showing twice. Now, I did change the preference to on my Mac. And of course, obviously, I haven't rebooted my computer because I'm watching on this on our meeting here. But I did notice before I closed the contact window that it swapped. So it put the iCloud was at the top, and then the Mac was down below with its folders. And now it's the other way around. So I'll after the show here, I'll try rebooting and see what happens. But it looks like the preference area might be the way I can sort through this then. Thank you.
I have heard that. I don't happen to have a solution, but do keep in mind that if you are syncing it, they are in both places at once, which is what you want. What you don't want is that both to be displayed at the same time, but you do want them in both places. And my alarm, it keeps on telling me that I haven't done something yet. So I am going to take some pills. Any other questions? We're going to start the regular meeting in about 2 minutes.
Once you mentioned about going to Seattle when you get a new computer and have them set it up somewhere over there at one of the good stores, right? What about the phone when you get a new phone?
The answer is Kathleen got a new phone this past week, and we had no trouble setting it up at home. However, there are a couple things to note about setting up a new phone or a new watch or anything that needs to be synced. First of all, she has everything on her phone synced to iCloud. We have there's a 2 terabyte plan where you can sync all kinds of stuff up to the cloud. And we had to get that because Kathleen had so many email messages, we really couldn't, she was running out of room all the time. So we got this very large plan. It's a family plan, so we share the space, but everything she has on her phone is synced to the cloud. When we got her new phone, you turn on the new phone, you bring it up next to your existing phone, and it says, would you want to transfer things? And you say yes, and it says the first thing it wants to know is everything synced to the cloud. And if you say yes, it is, then it says, oh, that's great, because that's the first thing we need to do. So everything on your phone need to be synced to the cloud. But then if you're using the new iPhone 14 in particular, the sync process, if everything's already synced to the cloud, the transfer process just takes about an hour. And that most of that time during the hour is exchanging messages back and forth between iCloud and the new phone, and then transferring the telephone number. And I'm going to talk about this during the meeting, the new phones have an eSIM. So one of the biggest problems in the past, especially if you were on Verizon, you got a new phone, even though you're supposed to be able to do all this at home, you found out that if you had a Verizon phone in particular, you had to go down to the Verizon store, you had to wait in line for hours, and then they fooled around with your phone for 2 hours and you came home frustrated because they couldn't figure out how to get it synced. With the eSIM, you don't have to talk to anybody. It electronically transfers the contents of the SIM on your old phone to the new phone. You don't have to call up AT&T, or you don't have to call Verizon online. You don't have to go to the store downtown that's not even operated by Verizon, it's operated by contractors. You don't have to do anything, it just happens. A couple things that can slow you down. If you have a slow internet connection, obviously the syncing things up to the cloud and then pulling things back down from the cloud, it's going to take a while. And the other thing is that you really should make sure that your old phone can be updated to the current operating system. If you have like an iPhone 6 on iOS 12, you're probably going to have a lot more trouble. But if you have an iPhone 7 or later, it should be a fairly painless process. In Kathleen's case, it took about 2 hours. In the past, she would just hand it to me and tell me to do it. And this time, because of the eSIM and because we didn't have to go to Verizon, I said, why don't you do it? And she did it and had no trouble at all. I'm not saying that Kathleen's not capable of it. She's got a PhD in this stuff. I don't. It's just that it's sort of like if you want to get things on the top shelf in the kitchen, she calls me for that. And if it comes to configuring electronics, she'd rather me do that than her. But she had no trouble at all. And she just followed the prompts and it did it. When you buy a new phone, Apple also sends you a message saying, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And you just follow the menu and it was done. I was really quite pleased.
We have a 6S Plus, so it probably wouldn't do that.
Yeah, the 6X Plus, you probably want to sync as much of it as possible to the to iCloud, and it should pull it back down. It might have it might be a bit of a discussion between the phone company and your new phone. But even with it, I think even then, as long as it's synced to iCloud, so that everything that's on your phone is in iCloud, I think it should work. Apple also, starting last year, if you buy a new phone, you get something like 30 days of free gigabyte storage on iCloud. I don't remember how much it is, but for something like 30 days, they give you a gigabyte of space instead of 5. They give you 100 gigabytes instead of 5 gigabytes. So they up your storage for 30 days, specifically so that you can transfer things up to the cloud and then pull it back down again. But in our case, we didn't have to worry about that because we already had it.
Lawrence,
Yes.
What if you have your phone just backed up to your MacBook Pro? Is that faster or
Yeah, you don't want to do that at all.
No?
Apple has essentially disabled most of that functionality. If you try and back up your phone to your computer right now, that's fine, but the new phones aren't going to ask for things off your computer. So that's not really an avenue anymore. If you notice that once upon a time, iTunes could store slideshows on your phone. It could play music on your desktop and so on and so forth. iTunes doesn't exist anymore. They broke all those functions apart, and just a lot of the things that it was doing before, they just stopped doing, because with the iCloud services, there's no need for that. But when iTunes first came out 12, 14 years ago, it was a very different, well, it might even be older than that. I have no idea. Hey Siri, when was iTunes introduced?
I found some web results. I can show them if you ask again from your iPhone.
Yeah, it was something like 2003. I asked, I wanted to demonstrate Siri, so I asked Siri when iTunes was introduced, and our HomePod behind me gave me an answer, which is not quite what I was looking for, but iTunes doesn't do that anymore. You really do want to sync it up to iCloud.
2001,
I think the
January 9.
okay, I'll go with that. And it's now 7 o'clock. Has our president appeared anywhere?
I'm here.
Oh, hello there.
Hi.
I see the Matterhorn.
Yes, I wish I was there. We don't have internet at our house, so I'm using my phone, which is a very interesting way of looking at Zoom, which I'm not used to. So we will not have a Treasury report, and I can't really see the members. So can I just hand it back over to you, and hopefully our internet will be up and going next month?
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, I wanted to text or email you, and I totally forgot. I wasn't even sure I could get on with my phone, but yeah, it's
Okay,
very small. I understand why you tell people to use their desktop for Zoom, because it's really small.
If you have an iPad, you can use your phone as a hotspot for your iPad.
True. But I didn't want to be I could do that. You're right.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to be with my iPad in the house and have my camera on. So I'm trying to hide behind the camera.
okay. Okay, we're going to dispense with our president and treasurer's report, and we're going to go on to a legal piece of information. I am recording this meeting at the request of several people. Does anyone object to that? And if you have your microphone on silent and I'm just not seeing your face, then I didn't hear whatever you said. But we're going to be recording the meeting because people have requested that. If the recording is halfway decent, I'll upload it to YouTube and then link to it from the Strait Mac site. I'm going to post something now. It's going to be the sign-in form, which I actually remembered to create a sign-in form. So if you could go in at some point and sign in that you were at the meeting, I would appreciate it. It helps me know what the heck we're doing. And before I get off on what we were supposed to be talking about tonight, I want to go to my very cluttered screen here and move stuff out of the way so that I can find something I wrote, which is...
We find the find up sheet in chat.
Yes, it should be in the bottom of the chat window. In October 1st, I want to do a 2-hour seminar, 1 hour of presentation and 1 hour for questions on privacy and security issues facing computer users, with particular emphasis on seniors. And it's going to be mostly just things that you should not do. And if now that I found what I wanted, I want to share my screen. And this is basically what I want to talk about. And I'll blow the image up a bit. It's going to be aimed at both Mac and PC users. And I say computer and privacy and security issues for seniors, basically having to do with the demographics of not only Strait Macintosh user group, but also the SCWM area. I moved here from a very urban area of Washington, D.C., which has the highest percentage of computer ownership of any place in the United States outside of Silicon Valley. And people were very, very much aware of what it meant for computer security. And I've been absolutely astonished at how few people know anything about computer security on the Olympic Peninsula. I'm not going to mention names, but at one point I went into a business, and the business had the router for their business. The computer router basically connects you up to the outside world. The router for their business was sitting on the reception counter where you went and paid the money. And all I had to do to hack it, if I wanted to, was just take a USB drive and plug it in with some malware, and I could have hacked their device. So obviously people aren't terribly familiar with computer security. And so, and not only is it computer security, but it's also privacy. A lot of people give away way too much information about themselves. For example, I see postings on Nextdoor about we're having a garage sale and we're going to be selling, and they have this inventory of stuff that they're selling. And they post this on a site that can be seen anywhere around the world. And people will come along and say, oh, this guy's got an antique oak table and chairs. Why don't we break into their house and steal it? They don't think about things like that because they're having a garage sale. October 1. Well, let's.
And it's 1 to 3.
And no, we're going to be there from.
No, we're going to be there 12 to 4, but it's 1 to 3.
1 to 3. Okay, so my.
That was an earlier draft.
That was an earlier draft. I'm probably going to have to be reminded of that again. Anyway, I'm planning this for October 1st. I've been slowed down a bit because of my eye surgery and not being able to see anything, but it's going to be free. It'll cover Windows and Mac, and to some extent, it'll cover things like iPhones, because people have amazing amounts of private material on their iPhones, and they don't realize that. I cannot begin to tell you how many people I've talked to who have an iPhone and they have not set a passcode on their iPhone. They say, well, I'm a retired school teacher. There's nothing I have that's sensitive on it, except that it has all of the names of their relatives, and it has their account that ties into Olympic Medical, so they could grab their phone and go through the medical record, all kinds of things that you can do with it. Plus, if it's not locked, they can just make long distance calls on your phone and run up your phone bill.
Right, so did you tell location?
Oh yes, this thing on October 1st, we're planning it for Trinity United Methodist Church in SCWM. They have a big fellowship hall, so it should give us some room.
It's the church next to the park.
Yeah, it's the church next to Carrie Blake Park on Blake Avenue. Anyway, and I would appreciate it if, among other things, people would come and help me sort people out at the door, because it's a fairly big building, and I'd like other people to escort people to things like the bathroom rather than have me stop my presentation to do that. So I would appreciate some help with this. And this is going to be, it's going to be at the church, but it's going to be sponsored by Strait Macintosh User Group. So basically I said our organization is doing this.
Open to the public.
And it's free. Any questions?
Open to the public.
And it's open to the public. So if you know somebody who's having or should pay more attention to their security and privacy, it's aimed at seniors, but it's not limited to seniors at all. I'm also appalled at what I see teenagers do with their phones and computers.
Hi, Lawrence.
Yes.
Just a quick question. Big ask. Any chance that you could record the presentation?
No, I definitely cannot, because the church has absolutely terrible bandwidth. So I really can't record it because they don't have any bandwidth. The I don't know how many of you know anything about telephone lines, but the church has a ADSL line, which stands for, I don't remember what it stands for, but it's a digital subscriber line. They date back to the 1990s. And if we cannot show a YouTube video in the church for classes. So it just shows you how bad the bandwidth is. I'm in the process of trying to fix that, but I'm probably not going to fix it between now and October 1st. So I don't know that I'll be able to record it.
The A in that is asynchronous.
I'm sorry?
The A is asynchronous.
Oh, asynchronous. Yes. Yeah. I will not tell you what I say the A stands for. So anyway, so that's what I'm going to be doing October 1st. And I'm going to make up a flyer and send it out, preferably with the correct date and time, post it on our website and tell people how to get there.
So what happens if 6,000 people show up?
If 6,000 people show up, we're not going to let that many in.
We can hold a couple hundred.
Now, it'll comfortably hold, we've given a certain amount of social distancing, it can comfortably hold like maybe 80. If we weren't still at the tail end of a pandemic, we could hold a couple hundred, but we don't probably want to have more than about 80 people there.
So you need to arrange ahead of time if you want to have somebody come or anything like that? Or?
No. That is one thing, one reason why I want volunteers though. I would like people to meet people at the door and give people's contact information so they can sign in. And so I need somebody to basically ask people to please sign in. Okay, I'm trying to remember what it was I'm doing. I'm talking about Siri and what's new from Apple. I'm going to go into what's new from Apple first, and I'm going to show my screen because I have pictures to show, and they're pictures from Apple, so not particularly exciting necessarily. And let's make you go away and you go away until later on. And you go away. I'm just going to launch all of these at once. And I accidentally pressed the wrong button because I can't see at all. So it's trying to print all of these, and it's a good thing it's not configured to print because I never print anything. I'm going to save this one here until later on. Start off with this. Was it last week? Week before last? Anyway, some time ago, Apple had a presentation, and one of the things that was interesting is that the presentation was on a Wednesday. And that doesn't really mean anything for most places, but Apple has traditionally had presentations on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. I can't remember when they had one on a Wednesday. One of the things they introduced was the new iPhone 14. And one of the things that it has is it has something called a dynamic island. The little notch at the top of the screen isn't there anymore. Instead, this black space floats around depending upon what's going on and displays different things on depending upon what it's doing. It comes in a nice purple, which I guess is nice. It kind of looks more lavender to me, but they say it's purple. And it's got the Pro version has 3 lenses on it, much like the Pro versions of the current phones. One of the things that's different is that it's got the lock screen now has much more interesting information. You'll see that this lock screen has a much larger time. A staggering number of people use their phone as their clock. And so it's nice and big, and it tells you what date it is. You don't have to go try and find it. And you can customize the screen with photographs and so on and so forth. So that's all nice. However, these features are also available in the current version of iOS 16 that you can download now if you have anything from an iPhone 7 on up. So you can get this new larger time on the lock screen and the date and time. Right now, you don't have to buy a new phone. And I'm going to, this is a still version of the picture that I was showing, that video that I was showing earlier. And I'm going to come back to this again. The new camera that it has, particularly on the Pro version, has a just unbelievable range of a dynamic range, which is going to be really quite stunning for photographs. I have a $3,500 digital single lens reflex camera that is still my main camera for going out and doing things. But for a lot of things, I actually know in advance that I'm better off taking a picture with my iPhone than in my $3,500 camera. Why? It's because the iPhone has this really, really powerful computer inside that, among other things, tries to keep things from being too silhouetted. On the original iPhone camera, it couldn't show nearly as many colors. And also here where you see this shadow of this landslide, it would have just shown that as black. And you wouldn't have been able to see these different shades of gray. And a lot of this, you just wouldn't, a lot of the detail you just couldn't see. So the new camera has some really outstanding features, including the ability to take macro pictures. And I have a friend in Colorado, when she saw the presentation that Apple did, immediately went out and bought one so she could take pictures of bugs. Probably most of you don't really want to go out and buy a new iPhone so that you can take pictures of bugs. But because the iPhone is the camera that you usually have with you, it's in your pocket or it's in your purse or wherever it is you happen to hold your phone, it's with you. That's going to be the camera that you take the majority of your photos. So having it be able to take things highly specialized, such as this really detailed picture of a bug, is a huge plus for a lot of people. So the camera, the biggest things with the camera are it has a much improved low light detection and a lot of things having to do with just the ability to capture light. The camera on the Pro phone can take pictures at 48 megapixels. By comparison, all previous phones, the biggest ones they could take were 12 megapixels. And you might think, why is that important? And why it can, the ability to take 48 megapixel images, I'll show you with that video in a second. The other thing that's unique is that it has an always-on display. The always-on display first came out on an Apple on the Apple Watch 7 has an always-on display or was it 8? Whatever it was, has an always on display so that you could look and see what time it was without having to tap the thing to wake it up first. And the new iPhone has an always on display, so you can tell what time it is or have it ready to go instantly. Yes, it dims it if it's in low light mode. So there are a number of things about the phone that make it quite slick. And I'm going to switch over to my, that's not what I wanted. Here's an example of that dynamic island and its ability to do different things. It's showing you it will pop up if you have a message. If you're playing music, it'll give you an indication the music is playing with this dynamic waveform. It'll tell you that you're listening to things with your earpods. All of that is interesting. But where is my other movie? Anyway, this is a 48 megapixel photo. Why do you want a camera that can shoot 48 megapixels? Well, because you can do this. If you crop part of that 48 megapixel photo, you can get close-ups that you couldn't get before. So this is what it looks uncropped. And if you crop it, you still have a very highly detailed photograph, but with much, much, much greater detail. So that's why you want a 48 megapixel camera. The other thing to note is not only is it 48 megapixel, but it can record things in what's called Apple ProRes, which is a raw format. And I should do something on photographs sometime so I can show you what it means to be able to do a raw photo. With a raw photo, I can pick something that I know is white and it'll instantly remap the color mapping for the entire photo to balance the photo. And you can do that if you're shooting in RAW, and you really can't do that with a JPEG. So that was super cool. The camera, Kathleen has had her phone now for several days and she hasn't taken a single photo. So blame Kathleen that we don't have any examples to show you. The Apple also came up with new watches. This is their newest one. It's called the Apple Watch Ultra. The one that they introduced now is the Apple Watch 8, 9. I don't remember which one it is.
8, I think.
Yeah, the Ultra is a whole new line of Apple Watch. It is quite a bit thicker than the regular watches, and it's got this very robust case. It's got a much larger speaker, and it's got extra buttons that it didn't have before, because among other things, the speaker has an alarm. So you can press a button and it'll set off an alarm, a 94 decibel alarm. They promoted it during their keynote as saying that it's useful in case you're lost in the woods and people are trying to find you and you're hoarse or injured and you can't see anything. You press the alarm and it will sound this alarm so that people know where you are. And that's one of the reasons why it has the larger speaker. But about half a dozen women that I know said that they wanted this because it would also protect you in case you were accosted in a store and you wanted help. You could just press the button and it would call for help. It doesn't say help, it just sets off an alarm, but you get attention that way. It has a much more sophisticated compass. They didn't explain what they were doing, but basically the compass is now also an inertial compass. The GPS allows you to have a really good compass in your watch or in your phone, but it requires access to a satellite. And if you lose the satellite signal, it really is not terribly accurate. This new compass in the Apple Watch Ultra is an inertial compass, so it based upon your movement will calculate where you are, even though it can't get a satellite signal. And so you can use it for going climbing in the mountains, and it'll give you a trail showing you where you've been. Really quite cool technology. It also is a dive watch. They spent a lot of time showing all the things you could do with it as a dive watch. It's good down to about 100 feet, which is about the limit that you want for scuba diving. Anything below that is really dangerous, which makes this probably just within the space of their presentation. This probably made this the leading dive watch on the planet, because in addition to being a dive watch, of course, it's an Apple Watch, and it does all the other things that an Apple Watch does. What astonished me was what they wanted for it. The regular watches, they come in, I think it's $399 for the one that is has GPS, and $499 for the one that has GPS and cell phone. The Apple Watch Ultra is $795 or $799, whatever it is. And there's only one price. So it comes with GPS, it comes with cell, and it can be used down to 100 feet and up to 14,000 feet in the air, and all kinds of really astonishing features. And it's much, much more rugged. The regular Apple Watch has a curved top, for example. The face on it is curved, and the Ultra is flat, which makes it less prone to being hit at an angle and breaking. It's really hard to break an Apple Watch, but this one's even much more robust than that. So the Apple Watch I was really quite taken with, and I'm not a diver and I don't go mountain climbing, but I was very impressed with the technology that they've put into that. The other thing, in addition to the phones, and there are 3 phones, there's the iPhone 14 in both small and large size, and there's the iPhone 14 Pro in small and large sizes. One thing's, I said 3, I guess that's 2. One thing that's different is that the smaller one is a 6.1 inch that is essentially has the same size screen as the previous Max phone. The iPhone 13 Pro Max is even larger than the older phone. So they managed to put a lot of technology into this. In terms of whether or not you want to upgrade, if you have anything older than an iPhone 6, you pretty much have to upgrade, because it won't run the current operating system, and the iPhone 6 is just genuinely obsolete. If you have an iPhone 13, the difference between the 13 and the 14 is not that dramatic. The camera is dramatically different for the Pro, but just the regular 13 and the difference between 13 and 14, it's not that dramatic. The always-on display is impressive. The dynamic island, I guess, is nice. You can get 1 terabyte of memory in the phone, which is kind of amazing. My first computer had 32K of memory. So for my first computer that weighed like 30 pounds and had 32K to something that weighs a few ounces and has 1 terabyte is amazing. But the difference between the 13 and the 14 is not that big a leap. Some nice advantages, but not huge. The difference between the 12 and 14 is fairly significant. And anything prior to the 12, it's a fairly dramatic advancement. The same with the Apple Watch. The new Apple Watch 8 has a number of advances, but between the 7 and the 8, it's not a huge step. Between the 6 and the 7, it's a fairly dramatic change. And the difference between the Ultra and everything else out there is quite dramatic. A lot of the software on these devices you can download to your current Apple Watch and your current Apple phone, assuming that it's new enough to support that. They did not talk about things they did not talk about. They did not talk about Apple's about Macintosh stuff at all. presumably there will be new Macs announcements next month. Whether that includes actual Macs or just the Mac operating system, I don't know. But Ventura should be out next month. They're having an extended QA/QC quality assurance, quality control testing of Ventura right now. And if and when it is out, it will come out. It should be usable on almost all current. If you have a Mac now that can support the current operating system, it should work with the new one. Any questions about that?
We were at Depot Bay with a friend, and he has the new Galaxy, and we were impressed by the zoom on it. However, what this thing does, I mean, you could use that as zoom, with the cropping, couldn't you, in a way?
Yes.
And I think it would turn out much better than the Galaxy.
The good news, bad news with the Galaxy is using interpolation for a lot of their zoom functions, and the interpolation means in order to make things look bigger, it basically fakes things that can't see, and it makes a guess at what is there. And all phones use interpolation, but on the Galaxy, in order to hype what they're doing, if you actually look at the photos, or you blow them up close up, you'll see that there's an awful lot of artifact in there. And I don't like the crispness of the new Galaxy. I'm actually more impressed with the Google Pixel phone than I am with the Galaxy. And Kathleen hasn't taken a picture with her new phone, so I don't know what that looks like, but I'm prepared to be impressed with that as well.
I've always been wanting more zoom, and when you did that with a picture a while ago, and then you had by cropping it and bringing something in, we were watching the whales, and they were there en masse, and every day we saw whales, and he managed to catch some shots, and I like it. Yeah, because see, like he brings this in and it still looks good.
Yes. Yes. The iPhone has an optical zoom. The optical zoom is what the actual lens can show. It also has a digital zoom. And I tell people to turn off the digital zoom, because the digital zoom, you can get that by just pinching it outward and it'll zoom in. The trouble is when you do that, it's just making a fuzzy picture. You're just making the pixels larger. You're not adding any new information. But with this new camera, I'm looking forward to actually playing with that. I'm going to take it out to my favorite place to take pictures, and take pictures of Mount Baker and the Dungeness lighthouse. But,
you can also use magnifier if you want to zoom in on something. It does pixelate it a bit, but magnifier also works.
I didn't change anything. Why is it telling me that? I just want to quit. You can choose to save your changes. I didn't change anything, just quit. Anyway, yes, the magnifier you can use with the current one. I don't know how many of you have ever noticed it, but if you go up to the control panel in your Mac, and you might have to add it, there is a magnifier. It looks like a magnifying glass. And if you click the magnifying glass, it'll magnify whatever it happens to see. Like in my case, it's looking at my hand. But it's really handy is if you happen to have eye surgery and you can't figure out what it is you're looking at, you can use the magnifier in the phone to blow it up. But that's still an optical zoom that's doing there. It's really quite accurate. It's just having a very close focus. The optical zoom, when you pinch something out, you can be looking at Mount Baker and it's just a little hump, and if you pinch outward, you can blow it up. But when you blow it up, you're really just making the pixels much, much larger. There's no new information, and it looks fuzzy. And
Right.
that's the trick that the Galaxy is doing, and I'm not a fan of that. Which is not to say the Galaxy is not a bad device. It's just I'm a photographer, and I much prefer what Apple's doing.
It says it has 100 times zoom.
It's like a 10 power binocular.
He says it's like a 10 power binocular.
Well, that might explain why I'm beginning to see a lot of fuzzy pictures with the Galaxy.
Right. There's little tricks you can play with that.
Yeah, one of the problems you have is just how thick a phone is. When the telephoto lenses, they need to have distance in order to zoom in on things. And when you have a really flat phone, there's just really not a lot of room there to make to have a true zoom. What the Advanced Research Project Agency, which is part of the Department of Defense, is doing, they have some zoom lenses on their satellites they have overhead. They get that zoom by bouncing light around inside on a bunch of mirrors. So in a fairly compact space, the light travels quite a distance between one lens and the next. And if they did that on an iPhone, you could have a zoom like that, but the iPhone couldn't do much else because it'd be full of a bunch of mirrors, and it wouldn't have too much left to do anything else. So there's just the limits in terms of physics as to how much zoom you can get. Any other questions about that? I'm going to stop sharing.
Well, I had one question, Lawrence. You mentioned that if you're running Monterey on your iMac, on your Mac, that you should be able to run Ventura. But I have a mid-2015 MacBook Pro with the Retina display, and it runs Monterey 12.6 beautifully. Why do they tell me that Ventura won't run on my MacBook Pro?
Okay, you happen to be at the trailing edge of that. For most people who are able to run Monterey, they shouldn't have any problem. When Apple does their updates, among other things, there are technologies that they're building in that have certain technical requirements. For example, with Apple, I can't remember the last Mac OS 10, 15 or whatever it was. I can't remember what the last one was. That was the first one that could use the security chip to create a secure enclave. It might have been 14. But anyway, there's this chip that's in newer machines, starting with one of the MacBooks, and then later on with the iMac Pro, and then with the new M series Macs. There's a security chip inside, and everything that comes into the computer, from your mouse, from your keyboard, over the internet, goes through this security enclave, and it checks it to make sure that it's legitimate. And if it's not legitimate, it doesn't pass it on to the CPU, and it just throws it away. And when you save information, such as your credit cards and everything are saved on that secure enclave. Most modern iPhones, since the iPhone 10, have a secure enclave. So when you save things in Apple Wallet, it saves it in that secure enclave. It's not in memory. It's not something that the CPU has direct access to. It's done in this enclave. And with the Ventura, there are a lot more security features that pretty much require a security chip. And for machines that don't have a security chip, they just can't do that. But the other thing that's a big issue has to do with the video RAM. Apple is using the GPU, the graphics processor unit in the video cards, to do a lot of functions to speed up the operating system. And either your MacBook doesn't have a GPU at all, it might use what's called a motherboard video card, or it might not have a GPU at all, or if it does, it's just too old. So the two big issues are does it have a security chip, in the graphics processor. All the M1 and M2 Macs have the graphics processors built into the chip. So with the M1 chip has a built-in, has in not only just one graphics processor, it's got lots of them. And the graphics processor on this is built into the chip that runs the phone. But that's one reason why a lot of the things like the Apple Wallet won't work on a lot of older iPhones because there's no security chip. You can't do the Touch ID, you can't do the Face ID because there's no security chip. So a lot of it has to do with the hardware itself. The hardware itself, Apple didn't want to cripple it, and so they just had to cut the line someplace. And it's usually because of the graphics processor chip or the security chip. So I'm sorry.
It's okay, thank you.
I have a friend who recently crashed their 2013 MacBook, and they said everything was fine because they were backing things up to Time Machine. And I looked at the drive because they were seeing if I could recover things off of their drive that they were using for Time Machine. While they had plugged it in, they'd never told Time Machine to use it. So even though it was plugged into the machine in 2017, nothing had ever been written to it. So the old machine was crashed and there was nothing on the backup. So that's kind of a commercial for why you should use Time Machine, and why you should also check to see if your Time Machine is really backing something up. It had never occurred to her to check. So you want to try and stay current, you want to stay secure, and you want to check. As Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. The verification part is important. The other thing I want to talk about today was Siri, because people asked about Siri. A lot of people know of Siri because they most oftentimes they use Siri, they use it with their phone. The phone's with them and they ask Siri to do things like, if I'm in the car and I want to call Kathleen at home, I can say to Siri to call Kathleen iPhone, and my phone will call Kathleen, and specifically it'll ring her iPhone. Now, we got rid of our landline phone, so it doesn't make any difference anymore. But at one point, I would tell it to call her, and it would ring the house phone. And if she wasn't at home, she wouldn't get the phone call. So you can tell it which one is the house phone, which one is the iPhone. And when you're creating things in contacts, if somebody has an iPhone, go into contacts, and for that phone number, there's a little pop-up. You can say iPhone. And then if you tell Siri to call the iPhone, it'll call the iPhone rather than just some old random phone number that it happens to find. So Siri can do things like that. You can ask Siri what time it is. You can ask Siri what the weather is. It's probably one of the most common things I'll ask is, what is the weather? We have a Nest thermostat. Now, the Nest thermostat is made by Google, and it's not by Apple, but we have this little box that I bought that allows me to ask Siri, what is the indoor temperature? And it knows the indoor temperature is the one from the thermostat, so it'll tell me what the thermostat is set to. And when it was hot this summer, I felt like I was melting, and I could ask Siri, well, what's the indoor temperature? And it would say, yeah, you really are melting. It wouldn't say that, but it would tell me what the temperature was. So there are a lot of things you can do with Siri. It gets a bit complicated though, because there is Siri on my watch, there is Siri on my phone, there is Siri on my computer, and then we also have HomePods. So as an example, I can ask Siri, there's this thing that on HomePod you can have called broadcast. We have multiple HomePods. And if I tell it to broadcast, Kathleen come to bed, it'll send it through the entire house telling Kathleen to come to bed, because she's been prone to staying up until. Sure, I understand. Yeah, that's perfectly okay. She's been known to stay up until like 1 a.m. working on something. So it'll send a message throughout the entire house. I don't have to know where she is. I can be in bed half asleep. I can have Siri call her. So Siri can do a lot of things, but
I didn't find that contact.
yes, sorry. Siri is talking to me. And I want to show tonight some of the things that you can do. And I'm going to share my screen, not so much so that you can see anything, because there's not a heck of a lot to show, but on the Mac, there's this thing up in the corner that allows me to bring up Siri. And right now it's trying to turn this into a request. And I don't know if you can see this, it's making a transcription of what I'm saying because I told it to. And when I stop, it's going to think that that's a command and it's going to say it can't do anything. Yes?
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Okay, it didn't think too much of that. Did any of you hear that?
Sorry, I'm still not sure about that. There's nothing to read.
Okay.
Yep, we could all hear it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can say things like, Siri, what time is it?
It's 51 p.m.
Siri, what is the temperature?
It's 61 degrees right now.
Who am I?
You're asking me, Peter?
So among other things, it knows who Peter is. There are also things that Siri's not particularly good at if you give it not enough information, particularly on an iPhone. For example, on an iPhone, I wanted to know, it was something somebody said on TV and I knew it was wrong. So I asked who won the, Baltimore won a Super Bowl some time ago. And I knew they gave the wrong year, but I didn't know who it was, what year it was. So you can ask it, when did Baltimore win the Super Bowl?
I found this on the web.
This is an example of something that's not useful when you're driving in a car. You ask when Baltimore won the Super Bowl, and it tells you it found this information, it displays it on your iPhone. Well, if you're driving, that's not terribly useful. It might be useful in terms of being the accurate information. I click on it and it says, I'm guessing it must have been 2013 because this is a 2013 article. So yes, you can get accurate information, but sometimes it's not necessarily appropriate for what you're doing. So if I asked my watch, for example, who won the Super Bowl, and it told me to look it up on the web, probably not terribly useful because the watch's watch face is about the size of a commemorative stamp. So there are things you can do and there are things that you can't do. And I also want to explain that there are also differences between Siri and other things that use voice. And I need this thing to move out of the way because it's blocking my access to the dock.
Lawrence,
Yes.
this is Carol. I was calling a friend and Siri said, home or mobile. And I guess I should have put mobile phone because I said mobile. And 3 times she called T-Mobile.
Oh, yeah.
And that was frustrating at the time.
This is the Apple Terminal, which most of you probably don't use, but there are things you can do in Apple Terminal that are sometimes useful. Let me, those are pictures. I want this thing, macOS licensing agreement. Huh. Okay. This is part of the Apple licensing agreement. I can type in a command in terminal that says say, and then paste in the agreement and press the return key.
You further acknowledge that the Apple software and services are not intended or suitable for use in situations or environments where the failure or time delays or errors or inaccuracies in the content Data or information provided by the Apple software or services could lead to death, personal injury, or severe physical or environmental damage, including without limitation the operation of nuclear facilities, aircraft navigation or communication systems, air traffic control, or weapons.
So you can get your Mac to read to you the Apple licensing agreement. Was that done by Siri? Was that done by Siri?
It didn't sound like it. Where is terminal?
Terminal is inside your utilities folder. In your applications folder, there's a utilities folder and there's terminal. Terminal allows you to talk to the Unix underpinning of the Mac. Mac OS X is built on top of another operating system called Unix. And Unix is kind of an interesting thing. Unix thinks the world started on January 1st, 1970. So that should tell you how old Unix is. That sound you heard was the Mac's speech synthesis. It's got a speech synthesizer. It wasn't Siri. However, the voice alone is not really what tells you that it was Siri, because you can change the voice in Siri, and I'm going to show you how to do that. The voice synthesis has been on the Mac since 1984. I don't know how many, you can go on YouTube and look at it, but when the Mac was introduced in 1984, Steve Jobs turned it on and it said, "Hello, welcome to Macintosh," using a voice synthesizer in 1984. That was a long time ago. The voice synthesizer today is much, much, much more sophisticated and comes in not only different accents and different genders, but also different languages. So it's come a long way. But this voice synthesis is not Siri. So I'm going to show my screen again. We're going to ask Siri, what is Siri? What are you?
Actual person, but you can still talk to me.
It took, the voice was cut out there, so I'll try it again. What are you?
I'm a virtual assistant, not an actual person, but you can still talk to me.
Okay, the whole point of Siri is to do things for you. So you can have Siri look stuff up for you. You can have Siri call people, such as use the telephone. You can look people up with Siri. This past week with not being able to see anything, I could have my Mac read things to me. But if I wanted particular things, I could have Siri go look them up for me. And part of that is that there is knowing what it is that you're asking and asking for things that are fairly unambiguous. For example, we found out by accident that I could ask my Apple HomePod to turn on our TV. Our TV is hooked into an Apple TV, and Apple TV has Siri. So when I asked the Apple HomePod to turn on the Apple HomePod talked to the Apple TV, which is this black box, and the Apple TV turned on the TV. It seems kind of strange, but it works. But that's all I could figure out how to do. I couldn't figure out how to get it to do anything other than turn on the TV, and I wanted it to be able to do something more. Well, I then came up with the idea that you can actually ask your Mac from the terminal to launch programs, and the key word there is launch. So I said, I asked the Apple TV to launch YouTube TV. Our TV, we don't subscribe to TV via Wave or CenturyLink or anything like that. We use an app called YouTube TV, because YouTube TV, among other things, gives us local channels. So if I wanted to watch news in Seattle, I can watch the ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, all of those channels in Seattle as local news. And so I thought, well, what happens if I tell Apple TV to launch YouTube TV? And sure enough, it launched YouTube TV. It can't pick the channel, but it could launch the app. So there are lots of things that you can do with Siri. And the trick is learning what things will work all the time and what things will work some of the time. If you don't have internet access and you want it to tell you who won the World Series, it probably won't be able to do that. But if you ask Siri what the time is, or to show me a map or something like that, that Siri on your iPhone can do that without actually talking to the internet. So you can tell it to show you Apple Maps and it'll show you Apple Maps. And from that, you can figure out where you're located. So there are a lot of things that it can do locally. And this is important because part of Apple's security process the last couple of years has been to increase the amount of things that are handled by the enclave on the Apple iPhone. Apple got really upset that police departments were subpoenaing people's phones and looking for things without a warrant. Actually, they weren't even subpoenaing them. They were seizing their phones and going through their phones without a warrant. And so Apple made that very difficult. It's very difficult to break into a Apple phone without a password. And even if you had a password, there's still some things that you don't have access to without additional levels of access. As one of the worst examples, there was a news photographer, there was a news reporter a couple years ago who went to Victoria to interview people who were being harassed by the Border Patrol. And he'd been writing a series of articles about people having their laptops seized when they came in through airports by Border Patrol. But Border Patrol said your constitutional rights don't apply because until you pass through Border Patrol, you're not actually in the United States, you have no rights. Well, this didn't go over too well with a lot of people. So he was doing a report on this. When he came back from Victoria, Border Patrol at in Port Angeles seized his phone. They didn't have a warrant, they just seized his phone. And he went to court and they had to give it back to him. But because his phone was an iPhone, they also got nothing off of it. Absolutely nothing. So that's why Apple has been increasing the security, because our government happens to be reasonably nice and friendly, but a lot of the governments on the planet are not. One exception, don't take your iPhone to China. Unlike the United States, China, all iPhones in China are encrypted by the Chinese government, and the Chinese government can break into them. So don't take your iPhone to China. You have no right of privacy in China at all. Anyway, when you ask the Siri where you are, when you ask Siri for the time and the date and so on and so forth, it doesn't make an internet connection to do that. And it's not recorded anywhere. It all takes place on the enclave. When Siri does need to do things like check on the World Series, Siri uses what's called an encrypted token. It creates a token on this machine and it says that I'm sending this token to Apple. Apple sees the token, responds to the token, sends the answer back. Apple doesn't know who sent it. So every time you ask Siri for something, it's always anonymous. Apple doesn't have that information. So if somebody wants to know, was somebody using this to, write nasty letters to the editor, Siri can't give them that information. This is a little bit different than things like your Google searches. When you go into Google and you search for libraries or peppermints or whatever you're doing, that is subject to search and seizure by the courts, because Google does record that and the courts do request that. Last year, I can't remember how many subpoenas. Actually, I guess they don't even have to be subpoenas. In the United States, Google alone had something like 40,000 requests from police department for information. And that's a lot. And most of them are not for high crimes. Donald Trump tried to get the courts to subpoena a bunch of people who complained about the contracts for his rentals on apartments in New York City. And he tried to get the courts to seize that information so he'd know who was complaining. And the courts complied, but they didn't get anything from Apple, but Google did provide that information, but they provided it to the court. The court didn't turn it over to the Trump organization. So there are reasons why Apple protects things, because there are people out there who would like to abuse it. And so Apple locks that up. Some other things that you can do, if I can bring up my notes. I can ask Siri to send an email. The user account that I'm using right now is Peter Lyon, my fictitious person. Send an email to Peter Lyon. Send an email to Peter Lyon.
What's the subject of the email?
Come to work. Come to work.
What would you like your email to say?
If you don't, you're fired. If you don't, you're fired.
Okay, here's your email message to Peter Leon. Are you ready to
send?
On it, okay. Sit.
Okay. Using Siri, I just dictated an email and I sent it. The hesitation there is that several things are going on here at once. And so it was hesitating. Normally it's quite a bit smoother than that. One thing to note is that when you're talking to Siri, a lot of people will say things like, there's a keyword, which is hey, and then you say Siri. And if you say them together, that's the command. It triggers Siri. Don't trigger.
Translate into which language?
No, I don't care. Don't hesitate after giving it the command. So if you wanted to say, give me the directions to Monaco, don't give the command to trigger Siri and then stop and wait for Siri to respond, because at that point, Siri's just going to say, you want me to do something. You don't want it to do that. So just say it like, hey Siri, what time is it? Hey Siri, what time is it?
It's 20:07. It's 8:07. Yeah.
So just say it as one continuous string. The other thing to note is that I told you that you can change some voices on the Mac, and I'm going to share my screen again to show you how to do that, because it's actually quite cool. We're going to bring up system preferences, and if you go into Siri, you'll see.
I'm Siri. Choose the voice you'd like me to use.
You can say, I can listen for Hey Siri, so I don't have to go push that button up there in the corner. It can listen for it if it's got an internal, microphone. Yeah, stop that. It's transcribing what I'm saying. You can pick an American voice, Indian, South African. I happen to like Irish.
Hi, I'm Siri. Choose the voice you'd like.
Hi, I'm Siri. Choose the voice you'd like me to use.
I happen to like this Irish female voice. And it's particularly cool the way that it says the word swim. How do you pronounce the city I live in?
I found this on the web.
I don't, it's answering the wrong question. Anyway, the answer is it does a really interesting number on Squim.
Hey Siri, what city do I live in?
Hey Siri, what city do I live in?
Sorry, I can't get that info for you here. Your home address, 1600 Pennsylvania. Washington.
No, I do not live in the White House. Oh, somebody asked me this earlier, so this is a good time to show you. Peter Lyon, my fictitious person, he says that he lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C. We're going to change his address by saying edit, and we're going to say 100 Washington, what is it, Avenue? I can't remember what it is. Is it Washington Street or Washington Avenue?
Oh, Washington Street.
98382. Okay, we're going, Peter Lyon now lives at 100 Washington. Hey Siri, where do I live?
Washington Avenue, Sequim.
Did you hear how it pronounced Sequim?
Sequim.
Sequim. So you can change the voice in Siri from, these are the choices that you have. If you say that you're an English speaker, if you set your machine to be Japanese or Irish or Spanish or some other language, it'll give you different choices. But these are the English choices. So you can have everything from Indian means South Asian Indian, American, South African, British, Australian. I just happen to like the Irish. But there are other voices on your machine, including the one that's used for the speech synthesis, which I can't remember where that, I have that. Speech. Sound. And I can't remember where the speech synthesis is right this second. I should have looked this up earlier. Ah, yes, here it is. It's under accessibility, spoken content. And you can pick various and sundry people, but you can also download additional ones. You can download additional voices, say customize, and get different voices. And the one that I like for this, English variants, Australia, India, Ireland, Scottish, Fiona. I really like Fiona. And it'll have to play Fiona. It'll have to download Fiona, which will take a while. But Fiona's got a really nice accent. Some of the ones that it has for the voice synthesis are kind of strange, such as this one. And this one. So I can't say that I can recommend a lot of those, but some of them are also quite pretty, if unintelligible. But most of us will stick with something more mundane.
Isn't it nice to have a computer that will talk to you?
And
Isn't it nice to have a computer that will talk to you? Hello, my name is Allison. I am an American English voice.
so you can have your Mac talk to you in different languages. And those are independent of Siri. Siri is a little bit more complicated because it's both voice recognition as well as speech. And the woman who is the voice of Siri, the original voice of Siri, she spent months just pronouncing individual syllables that Siri then puts together to be the voice of Siri. So it has a huge range, but obviously it doesn't know how to say squim, and I really don't blame it because squim kind of confuses a lot of people. Just as a trick, if you happen to have somebody who doesn't know how to pronounce squim, there is a YouTube video on how to pronounce squim. So if you go into YouTube and you look for, say, how do you pronounce squim, there's a YouTube video that all it has is it pronounces one word. And you just send people that link and they'll know how to pronounce squim. Let me look at my notes again, see if there's anything that I wanted to cover that I didn't. Okay, I covered pretty much the things that I wanted to cover. Do you have any questions about Siri that I didn't answer?
Lawrence, not so much about Siri, but about an iPhone. I may be watching too much crime on TV, but can you set up a system on the iPhone that if you're in trouble, you can either hit a button or do something very simple, and it can send out messages to, calls to different people, or text messages and things like that?
Yes and no, but it's a little bit more basic, and it's built into the iPhone. If you hold down the volume control and the on-off switch at the same time, hold them down at the same time, one of the choices that pops up is emergency call. And with that emergency call, it dials 911. And with that, you just swipe it over there so that it'll actually make a 911 call. And because it knows where your phone is, because it's got GPS built into the phone, you can just put the phone in your pocket, or you can put it in your purse or whatever. You don't have to actually hold it with you. They'll call you, and if you don't answer, they'll send a car. So recently we had somebody about a quarter mile, sort of in our neighborhood, but about a quarter mile away. They the husband had a heart attack, stroke. He had a stroke. His wife just triggered the SOS function and dropped the phone in the kitchen or wherever she was. And then she went and attended to him. The 911 caller called the phone and said, do you have an emergency? There was no response. She was screaming, help me, but they couldn't hear that. They came to the house anyway, and they helped her, and the response was like 3-4 minutes. So if you do not respond and it calls 911, the police or the fire department will come to your home. If you do not respond, they'll just come. And because it's the phone, they know where it is. They'll know where it is within a few houses. Sometimes it gets a little messy because we're well above the equator, so it's a little bit harder, but they'll usually be within a house or two of where the call was made. So that's the simple way to do that.
Your iWatch could do it too.
I'm sorry?
Oh, you were just holding up your iWatch.
Yeah,
so you can
the Apple Watch also has the same function. It's got an emergency function that you can call 911 with it very rapidly. It also will do it automatically. My mother, she died in January, but last November she had a hard fall, and I didn't know if she had hurt herself or not. She had an Apple Watch. We bought an Apple Watch for her. The Apple Watch detected the fall. It called 911. I ignored them because I could hear a watch saying, 911, can I help you? I didn't even try to respond to that. I was trying to help her, and I was afraid to move her. The watch called them, and they came to the house, and all I had to do was open up the door. So the watch called her. I didn't have to do a thing. There was also a famous case, after this new fall function came about, which was, I think that came out with the Series 6 a couple of years ago. There was a hiker in the near North Bend who fell down a cliff, and there was enough of a signal that his watch, he was unconscious. His watch said there's been a fall, and the first responders came to where they thought the signal was. They couldn't figure out where it was, but since it was at the top of this grade, they went down the side of the mountain, and they found him. And from start to finish, it only took about an hour. And that was a really good demonstration of what the watch can do. I forgot to mention, the new Apple phone has a crash detector, so that if you have an Apple phone 14 with you in your car and you're in an automobile accident, the phone automatically dials 911 and says that you've been in a crash. There have been,
How does it detect that, you know?
it's got a bunch of accelerometers on it. An accelerometer is kind of a fancy name for a chip that just detects an extreme change in acceleration. And the accelerometer on it can detect that the phone has been in a crash, and it'll dial 911 to notify them that you've been in a crash. So in addition to your phone now, your watch, the phone now does that as well. And they did that because a whole bunch of people had been in crashes with phones, and they, in the process of being in the crash, the phone was sitting on, say, the seat next to them. They were in a crash, they were injured, the phone fell on the floor, they couldn't find it. And they thought, gee, it would be nice if the phone called and told people I was in a crash. Well, now it can. So it's another feature of the iPhone 14 that I forgot to mention.
And this location detection, it now relies on GPS and not pings from a cell tower. So much.
Well, this guy in North Bend, there weren't any cell towers around. He wasn't that close to one. So the farther you are from a cell phone tower, the less accurate it gets. And unless you're close to the equator, the GPS satellites are around the equator. So if you're right at the equator, they're really, really accurate. But the farther you go north, if you think about the globe, it's hitting things at an angle the farther north or south you go. Yeah. So the farther north you go, the less, or south you go, it's less accurate. And we're still in good shape, but it's not as accurate as it is at the pole.
But
and
the watch, the Ultra?
That's one thing about the new Apple Watch Ultra. It has its own low power GPS detection. So it gets really, really, really accurate results without a cell tower. But it's also $795.
It has 2 years of satellite service for free on it.
Yes, it also, there's a special way that it can talk to communication satellites using a low power frequency that doesn't need the telephone system. It's talking directly to the communication satellites. And it's a subscription service, except that if you buy an Apple Watch Ultra, you get 2 years of that for free. Now, my hope is that you would never need it, but it's a nice piece of technology. I'm glad to see what Apple could do with the Ultra. I was really impressed. I don't need an Ultra, but I was really impressed with their presentation. And if you consider the original Apple Watch couldn't do a lot of the things that this one did, and they had $3,000 models for the original watch, and this one's $795 no matter what, because there aren't any options. It just has all this stuff built into the Ultra.
Lawrence, note the new iPhone 14's that same emergency satellite connection.
Yes, it's in the iPhone 14, but it has the satellite detection for direction, but you actually have to be able to point the phone at the satellite. It'll say point it this way, and you have to actually point it. With the watch, you don't have to do that. Any other questions? I have a question for you. The question is, how many of you have installed the latest update to iOS and to the Mac operating system on your machine? The one that came out a couple weeks ago.
I got iOS, but not, I can't do the Mac.
You can't do the Mac because the Mac's too old, or what?
Yep.
Yeah. There were a whole bunch of security updates in that last update. So it's important that if you can update, that you do update, because among other things, people out there are doing evil things. So in order to protect yourself, you want to make sure that you do those updates and not put them off. Next month, when Apple introduces the new macOS Ventura, is a good time to think about getting a new machine if you don't have an old one, because most Mac attacks come out after a new introduction of the Mac operating system. Why? Because Apple sends out a list to security officials of all the things that have been patched. And if Apple has patched all these things, this means that old operating systems have those vulnerabilities. So hackers start attacking older machines because now they know that that thing isn't working. And so they'll attack older machines. So you want to give some thought to that. There's also a possibility Apple will introduce some new Macs next month, but if they do, I think it might be like M2 versions of previous machines. But that's just a guess. Don't really know. Any other questions? Pardon?
Are they going to have a 27-inch? Do you think?
I don't know. The 27-inch is kind of one of those things that if you go and look at Costco has one of the new 14-inch Macs, and they've got an older one right next to it. If you look at the older model one, you can tell because it's got a silver case, and the new one, you'll see that that new 14-inch machine is much, much, much brighter and just more vibrant than the older machine. And the older machine is 27 inches, but in terms of the clarity and everything, I really don't think that they're comparable at all. I think the 14-inch one is much more attractive. So yes, it's possible they'll come up with a 27-inch or something else, but if the size is what's holding you back, I don't really know that that's a good excuse for keeping a really old machine. If you have
You're talking 24-inch, not 14, right?
24-inch, sorry, not 14. 14 would be a little on the small side. There's also probably going to be the iPad, new iPad operating system released next month. But again, that's just a guess. Up till this year, when they introduced a new iPhone operating system, they introduced a new iPad operating system at the same time. This year, they didn't do that because there's the file manager, which is the way that you can go in and manipulate files on the iPad. They're still doing some tweaks with that. They want to give the user more control over moving files around and renaming them and stuff. And apparently that still needs some work. And so that was not released, and it might be out next month as well. And there's also a rumor that they might have a new iPad, but again, that's just rumor. So, any other questions? I will be sending out information about the presentation that we do at Trinity on October 1st on privacy and security. For people in SMUG, you've probably heard me talk about these things in bits and pieces almost every month, but that's all I'm going to talk about is just privacy and just security. And I'm going to cover a very little bit of Windows and a very little bit of Mac. Most of the problems for privacy and security are human behaviors rather than technology, just things that people don't do and things that people do that cause them grief. So assuming that I can see and I can get my presentation together, that's what I'm going to be doing October 1st. And I would appreciate if people would come and help guide people and get people to sign the sign-in forms and things like that. So any final questions?
That's not a regular meeting. That's in between. So
that's in
like
between.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm doing this as a kind of a public outreach from Strait Macintosh user group to the wider world, because a lot of people don't know what a user group is. And I've just been, I cannot tell you, almost once a week, I've been asked by people desperate for me to come and rescue them because they did something they weren't supposed to. And I'm not in that business. It's not how I want to spend my time. So I can do it by trying to educate a bunch of people at once, or I can be heartless and just ignore people. And I don't want to do that.
It looks like there's 3 iPhone 14s. Is that right?
There's an iPhone 14 in a small and large size, and there's a iPhone 14 in our iPhone 14 Pro in a small and large size.
An i14 Pro Max.
Oh yeah, that's the big one. The Pro Max is the only difference between iPhone 14 and iPhone 14 Pro is the size of the case and the battery life. All the electronics are the same.
Okay, thank you.
Lawrence, will you be telling us where you need help on the October 1st? And,
yes.
What sort of help you need?
They show up at 12:30.
Yeah, my companion in crime, Kathleen, says if you show up at 12:30, she can help guide you to things that she wants help with. I'm going to be doing the presentation, and she's going to, she's clergy at this church, so she's going to be doing the managing the church part of it. All-purpose clergy. Oh, that's a joke. We used to joke that Spock on Star Trek, they had all these scientists, but anytime there was a science problem, they took it to Spock, and I joked that he was an APS, he was an all-purpose scientist, and Kathleen's an all-purpose clergy. So, you know, she's clergy, but she also is the doorman and all that stuff too. Anything else? Well, in that case, I thank you and good night.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lawrence.
Bye.